Hi, I'm Dylan Paris, and today I want to talk about why the Arturia Keylab Essential 49 is my favorite MIDI controller that I own. Now, I guess the only caveat here is that if you count the Ableton Push as a MIDI controller, then the Ableton Push 2 is probably my favorite MIDI controller. But I mean mostly like a keyboard you can plug into multiple devices to control different notes and parameters on many things. I've used this guy with my iPads, I've used it with the MPC, with Ableton on my PC, Mac, whatever. It's got I/O that lets you use it with a variety of different things. But the thing that makes this keyboard stand out for me personally is how well it integrates with Analog Lab 4 and 5. The software that Arturia makes as a central hub for all of their VST sounds, including their classic emulations in the V collection, as well as Pigments. This is definitely not a sponsored video. I own a couple pieces of Arturia gear as well as the V collection, the most current version being 8 and Pigments. I bought those all with my own money on sales, but I did buy them. And I want to talk about what makes this thing so great. And that really is when you're using it with a computer to control the V collection. This keyboard becomes a bunch of different synthesizers. Now, it doesn't have audio out, and it doesn't produce sound by itself. It's a MIDI controller. It's not a synthesizer. However, once you have Analog Lab going, either as a plugin or by itself running as standalone software, you have the ability to browse between the Analog Lab presets, and if you own the V collection, you can actually browse every preset for every single device in the V collection just on this keyboard. A big reason why I started looking into DAW-less gear late in 2018, 2019, and last year was that I get kind of sick of just looking at a computer after working on a computer all day. I think that's a pretty normal reason why a lot of people want to go DAW-less. What I realized for me was that a purely DAW-less workflow had too many disadvantages. I'm too used to all of the polyphony benefits and sound quality benefits and the plugins you can use on DAWs to just give them up entirely. But what I love about the Keylab and the Push, for example, are that they allow a hardware interface to become almost a hybrid hardware and software. And so I'm going to show you a little bit of what I mean with this, using the V collection to just browse some presets and show you how this thing really feels like a synthesizer to me. And why really the greatest gift that this thing has given me is an answer for my gear acquisition syndrome. Because if I load up a DX7 in Analog Lab and I set it to all, I now have all of the Arturia V Collection DX7 presets on this thing, and I can control the DX7 with the knobs and faders here to adjust different parameters, as well as browse the various presets of any machine in Analog Lab using this little dial and these buttons. Well, that's enough talking. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to show you my setup here with the Keylab Essential 49 using Analog Lab on my Aero 15 laptop right here, which is pretty cool, and I'll probably do a video about that too in the future. Before I get started, consider liking and subscribing. Every YouTuber says it, and the reason they do is because it really does help channels grow. I'm so grateful for everyone who's been doing that. The channel has been growing in a really awesome way, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. Along with that, I have an album on Spotify and every other music place in the world, including Bandcamp. The album's called There's Something Better. I'm very proud of it, and I'll have a link to it below if you want to check that out. All right, let's get started. Okay, so I've got an instance of Analog Lab already loaded up. So if we go to here, this category or character, and make sure you're on map select Analog Lab, because you can have up to 6 user maps and then DAW or Analog Lab. We want Analog Lab. If you go here, we can actually see we have a bunch of different instruments. These are the instruments that are in the V collection, as well as Pigments. So let's check out OBXA and go to preset. So that's pretty. What does the mod wheel do? Vibrato, and we have all these parameters here we can change. So let's try cutoff, resonance, these are usually the effects over here on the far right. So this is going to be our reverb volume and our delay volume. change the release here. And so it's like having a hardware synthesizer, right? You get all the control, all these parameters, except it's not just an OBXA or 10A or however you pronounce it. It is all of these, right? One of my favorites is the DX7. It's a synthesizer I keep fantasizing about buying, but I realized I have it. I have it here, and there's plenty of arguments for why it's not exactly the same. My audio has to come out of a computer. It's, this is just a MIDI controller. However, I get a lot of these benefits that you get with hardware, right? Click in. And you can use the scroll wheel here to go faster through stuff. Let's try a additive piano. Or this. Or this. And if we're bored of the DX7, let's try the Mini here. And so having all of these different instruments in one browsable, standalone kind of device, right, is really cool. Now, obviously, you need a computer to use Analog Lab. I believe it can be a Mac or PC. And once you have that and it meets the minimum specs, you are going with a bunch of different awesome sounds here. You can see what the knobs affect in the software, but I like just experimenting with them here on the device. So yeah, it's kind of, just a simple overview, but the ability to browse through these different presets, through these different instruments, all here on this one device, makes it feel like you have multiple hardware synthesizers instead of just one. And it kind of helps me deal with any kind of gear acquisition syndrome I might have, because instead of thinking, oh, I need to go buy a new FM synth, I can just say, okay, today I'm going to play with the DX7. And let's see, or how about instead of instruments, right, we're gonna just play with different pads or leads. Let's do leads. Just a couple of button presses and we're into a whole new sound. Change our characteristics. What if we do want pads? We want bright pads. We don't want deckers, we want slow build. And so yeah, the Keylab Essential 49 with Analog Lab together have really become one of my favorite ways to play with synth sounds and kind of make sure that my gear acquisition syndrome doesn't get too out of hand. I bought the V Collection for about $200 or $300 on sale, and then added on an additional couple of hundred for Pigments, OBXA when it came out, and then the V Collection 8 upgrade. Keyboard itself, I believe, is around $200, $250. And my only real issues with it are that the knobs are sometimes aggressive and will go way higher or lower than I mean to. That's a little not great. And the other thing is that in hindsight, I probably would have got the more expensive Keylab Mark II, specifically the 61 key model, rather than the Essential 49. But at the time I bought this, I wasn't playing keys all the time, and 200-ish for a MIDI controller was still the most I'd ever paid for a pure keyboard. But a lot of the practicing I've done in quarantine has just been using this keyboard and playing with different sounds and just practicing playing chords and different notes and getting my overall performance skills up. And so now that I am more of a keyboardist than I used to be, I do kind of want the Keylab 61 Mark II, but I'm trying to be good and not buy new gear. I talked about that in my financial responsibility video that I might link somewhere, or you can find it on my channel. I'm trying to focus on what I have, and the Keylab Essential with Analog Lab is a really good way to get a lot of bang for your buck and feel like you have a lot of machines at your fingertips. Again, not sponsored. I would love free stuff from Arturia, but currently I've paid for everything I have. And yeah, I'm just a fan. So feel free to comment below any questions you might have or some of your favorite setups. I know Native Instruments has some keyboards as well that are really compatible with the Native Instruments instruments are similar to the Machina in how you can browse different Native Instruments VSTs. Those are very appealing to me, and I may at some point also get one of those, but in my head it feels kind of weird to have the Keylab and a Native Instruments keyboard, especially because I have the Ableton Push 2, and so I can browse Native Instruments plugins using the push. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please consider checking out my album and following me on Spotify, like I said earlier. Consider liking and subscribing, and have a great week ahead. All right, later.